Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. I always like to look at the participant list, and I see so many familiar names out there. We're excited about today's presentation. Oldcastle's got a lot of partnerships that are very important to us, and these are two of them that are right at the top of the list. One is with Westlake Royal Stone, and it really is a great product for us. It's a thin veneer. We've seen so many things happen with thin veneer. We get a lot of questions about installation, specification, and all those different things. So that was one of the things that made this course a priority for us. We're going to have Paul Lott presenting today. Paul is a area sales manager from the Upper East Coast. I think he said he's based out of Delaware. And then we also have Sean Gaffney, who is our rep here in the state of Florida. I'll be in the background with some questions, but those two are going to be the lead on this. Our second presentation is going to be Anita Hellickson with Laticrete, and Laticrete is by far, we feel, the best way to install any kind of thin veneer. So we feel these two presentations go really well, talking about the best way to put the product in there to achieve all the warranty and really get the resilient product that you want or project you want. I always sit and go through things before these presentations, and I hadn't made one in a little while with AIA Florida exclusively. My numbers are right. We're up to, in 11 years, over 47,000 CEUs we've done with the AIA Florida, which is sort of blowing my mind. Makes me feel old and, successful at the same time, I guess. I don't know. But what I want to do is hand it off to Paul. We love this relationship with you all. We're glad it's going so well, and we're glad to be here. Paul, I'm going to let you go ahead and get started, and then I'll see you all between the next presentation and this one when I bring Anita in. But we look forward to it. Ask any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Just for starters, again, we'd like to thank Chris on behalf of Sean Gaffney and myself. We'd like to thank everybody for putting this together and taking the time to attend the presentation today. I will be going off screen here in a second for my video, but we will be presenting today Transforming Spaces Through Color and Texture by Eldorado Stone is the brand that we're using today under the Westlake Royal Stone Solutions. Sean is monitoring the questions and answers. This is a health, safety, and welfare credit as well as a GBCI credit. So if you're a member of GBCI and need the credit, I'm going to ask either Sean if he has it. If he doesn't, I'll put it in there. Since it's self-reporting the number, so you have the information. And also, I know you're in listen-only mode, but about a third of the way through the presentation, and then towards the end, if Sean's got a good amount of questions or wants to interrupt and discuss some of those questions that are being pointed out, we're certainly going to stop as the presentation moves along. But with that being said, I'll move along with the presentation. From a standpoint, though, before we get into the actual AIA presentation, and I asked permission to make sure we could do this, of course, I am locking up. So let me see if I can go out of this for a second and go back in so I'm not locked up. And this is why we test this stuff all the time so that we can work. But just before we go into the actual AIA, we just want to update everybody, if you're not familiar with what has transpired with our brands. In October of 2021, Boral North America was purchased by Westlake Corporation out of Houston, Texas. It was a great acquisition for us as we move forward now. And if you're not familiar with Westlake, it's a chemical company that is in the building products industry, and then they look to expand their portfolio. And with the acquisition, they added everything you see here on our slide, which is our siding solutions, trim, the stone, of course, roofing, outdoor living, and the windows. And the reason why we just like to present this is if any of these products are of interest to you now or in the future, is certainly reach out to us as you're through Sean or through Chris at Oldcastle to get in contact with us, and we can connect you with the reps in those divisions. With that being said, our brands today that we'll be talking about, or not necessarily talking about, but representing, is Eldorado Stone, Cultured Stone, Dutch Quality, Stonecraft, Versetta is in there, and then the Kindred Outdoors. So quite a few brands that are falling under our Westlake Royal Stone Solutions. And just wanted to give you an overview of our product distribution and availability. One note is we have fixed our supply chain issues and have very minimal, if any, lead times. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. Especially, we found that there's a lot of background noise saying that there's still supply chain issues, but they are not with Westlake Royal Stone Solutions. And there's plenty of coverage, especially on the East Coast here, which is of our interest for Florida. And then we also have plenty of coverage that is supplying from out in the West Coast, and there is some transfer. So we have everything covered. With that being said, moving along with AIA, this is, of course, an AIA presentation. And from a course description, I will not be reading my slides as we go along. I know how annoying that is, but just want to bring you up to what we're ultimately looking to accomplish today is 4 general categories, which is the quality and characteristics of and versatility of stone veneer, wall systems and installation guidelines, unique methods of installation and code and resources, and lastly is transition details and moisture prevention. Personally, the last is the most important. With whatever the cladding material that you may be using in your designs, the details are ultimately where we need to spend the most time so that we make sure we can keep these buildings as dry as possible. And moving on to the first objective, which is the quality of characteristics and of our architectural stone veneer. Obviously, or not obviously, we are trying to replicate natural stone. Quality stone manufacturers literally use natural stone to create their molds so that we can have the textures replicated of the natural stone, versus some of the lower quality products that are out there that are using molds that don't use real material. They're simulating it to create their simulation as well. However, when we're talking about this, we're trying to get those textures, the dimensions, the profiles to be as realistic as possible. And I will be talking about the coloring process, which is ultimately to give you that realization or that mimicking of a real stone. When it comes down to it, though, the mold technology is one of the most key important aspects from the texture standpoint. We're using multiple materials, whether it be a latex, urethane, or silicone, which is one of the relatively new technologies to do this mimicking. These molds are key importance for multiple reasons, and one of them is from keeping the tolerance or the dimensions of the stone so we can actually have the material removed from the boxes when they're on the job site, set out or laid out for installation, and then go up on the wall with minimal impact in any additional labor, cutting down on waste as well as maximizing the labor to get the square footage on the wall. When it ultimately comes down to it, we are just trying to mimic real stone throughout that may not be available in certain areas, but we are making them available throughout the country. Ultimately, though, when you see style and versatility, we're trying to make as many different styles, textures, and colors so that we're not limiting you, the design community, in accomplishing the goals and objectives for your clients. So ultimately, you can see some different materials, whether it's an interior application or an exterior application, that we're ultimately trying to actually integrate ourselves with other materials as well and make that as seamless as possible for you. Just from some nice pictures in some of these slides here, some of the products are very versatile to be able to be used from a residential application to an institutional application, as well as some of the commercial applications. And just trying to show the scale of some of these projects. It's often said that, oh, I have these large walls, I need a larger scale stone to work properly with the design. Not always necessarily true, and we're just trying to show some of the different looks that we can accomplish. In particular, there are quite a few systems out there now that high quality manufacturers make, which are panels, which is a ease of installation and a quickness of installation to be able to cover the areas, but actually the panels integrate multiple different stones and textures going up on the wall at one time. The use and application of stone interior has taken off dramatically in the past 5 to 6 years, I would say, when we look at the square footage coverage. And ultimately what it was been boiled down to is, as funny as it sounds, the concrete is a warming effect feeling in multiple applications. So it's just something to keep an open mind about, that just because it's concrete, it does have that warmth for interior applications, more than just something of a residential situation, as we see here in some of the slides. But when I was talking about our mold technology and trying to simulate natural stone, this is ultimately where we're getting into trying to make it as realistic as possible. We're accomplishing that goal. And as you see in this slide in the picture, there's quite a bit of texture and detail in some of the different stones. And the use of mineral oxide pigments is one of the key accomplishments, as well as some of the other pigments. Ultimately, though, the oxide pigments allow us as manufacturers to layer the coloring in the molds, which actually happens. So I'll step back a second. The mold goes on the manufacturing line, and then the technicians that are on the line are literally painting the coloring into the molds before the aggregates are added. So it's on, the coloring is on the surface of the stone and not throughout the aggregates. But as that paint is applied, there's multiple layers so that we're making it look, we're mimicking that natural look. I will tell you, there's usually a base, there's always a base color. And in most applications of high quality manufacturing, you will see a minimum of 4 colors. And in one of the most recent cases, we're up to 13 colors being layered into the manufacturing process. The reason why we're saying this iron oxide pigment is you use high quality pigments. There's other pigments that will work as well, but the best performing is mineral oxide. The mineral oxide pigments is it doesn't bleed. When you bleed, it actually will offset, or basically, you know, set off the bells and whistles that it is manufactured material. I use a scenario that if you're using a marker and on a piece of paper, it gets wet and it's going to run or bleed. It's the same scenario with our materials as well. Of course, it's a wet application, but it does not bleed, and it shows that texture of the stone that's in the mold, which of course is mimicking the natural stone that was a part of the master. The use of our products are designed for long-term durability. No matter whether you're designing for something in the south or another warm climate out in the west, but if you're designing for something in the northeast and you're dealing with your freeze-thaw conditions, or you're dealing with something up in Canada, the same situation, we are using, high quality manufacturers are using the best, strongest aggregates to deal with these conditions. Ultimately, we are looking for the quarries that have the best materials. They're tested beforehand. We try and source as local as possible. And we test the materials not only in their strength and durability, but also we're checking for iron contamination, which could have some degradation problems long-term. But ultimately, in our proprietary mix design, we are following ASTM standards that the product, the stone cannot exceed 15 pounds per square foot, and the system cannot exceed 25 pounds per square foot, which I'll go into later. But ultimately, we are producing this, or making or meeting this limitation of the ASTM standard in our mix design of sand and aggregate, but we're also implementing a expanded volcanic pumice, which is a very lightweight, dense material that allows us to meet that standard of the not to exceed 15 pounds per square foot for the material. In regards to sustainability benefits, there's quite a few bullet points that I have on here. I will tell you, high quality manufacturers, of course, are working with durability options. And also we're talking about recycled. Most of the facilities are 100% recycled with any of the water that's being used at the facilities, and any of the material that's used as waste or becomes waste from most high quality manufacturers. They're not integrating the actual recycled content itself in the mix design, but they have the contracts with others that are taking our products, so they're being recycled and not going to the landfills. And as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to stay as locally possible in regard to sourcing our materials. So we're cutting down on the shipping. one on the cost, and then also, of course, for the trucks and the fuel being spent going across the roadways. And a big implementation in the manufacturers or the manufactured stone veneer industry recently has been to switch over from the old cardboard with the wax covering that has been used, which cannot be recycled and goes to the landfill. We are switching over to recycled packaging. It's great for the environment, but it's also great for the durability of this product when it's leaving manufacturing facilities, going to a distributor, or going direct to a job site. And sometimes the time fashion doesn't work out too well. Material sits there for a long period of time, or it's stored outside for a long period of time. The product is not being compromised through the degradation of boxing, which is going to fall apart as the old packaging did, and the recycled packaging long term is much better for delivering the product to the wall as safe as possible. And then, of course, the material can be recycled after its use. High performing products, obviously, we have all of our evaluation reports, which everything can be retrieved from the manufacturer's website through the independent evaluation services. And then we have our ASTM testing. I'm in the Northeast here. One of the biggest things I talk about with the multiple bullet points is moisture absorption and freeze thaw. I know when you're talking in the South and we're talking about our wind load resistance, the high quality manufacturers should have, or most of us have, all the testing requirements so we can meet the local codes in your state or your county or even the local municipality. But ultimately, the one thing I do want to press before I move forward on this slide is ASTM C1670. This is the latest and most recent update in high quality manufacturing. If you want to eliminate the low quality manufacturers from getting involved in your jobs, take the time to get the language to specify that the manufacturer meet the ASTM C1670 standards. It's amazing how many manufacturers are not able to pass this test, or let alone put the resources into meeting this standard. We're highly promoting this for multiple reasons: long-term durability, and also trying to make sure that you get the good quality manufacturers and the good quality installers on your job site to accomplish your ultimate goal for your client. And as the one given, or it's not given, but just to say, is in manufactured stone veneer, high quality manufacturing comes with a 50-year warranty. Moving on to our next objective is wall systems and guidelines. Ultimately, there's really three primary systems: the standard wood substrate, CMU, and then cement board. Cement board has gained quite a bit of use or implementation recently due to minimal labor or the lack of labor in certain areas. So I'll talk about that relatively quickly. But going to the initial, and this photo is pulled off of the NCMA MSV guide, which I'll be talking in another slide. But this is just getting into, and I don't want to assume that anybody has experience, and I'm sure there's a lot of experience on this webinar. But the standard frame is talking about your stud spacing of 16 or 24 inches, and then your sheathing. Hopefully you're using the best grade sheathing, but ultimately we're seeing some of the lower grade sheathings installed. But we want to make sure that once that sheathing is installed on the wall, whether stone is scheduled relatively quickly or it's going to be a bit of time, a key component is to make sure that the sheathing is protected from moisture immediately upon installation, so that anytime that plywood or whatever the sheathing material would be, if it gets exposed to moisture, there's that potential that it's going to swell and expand like a sponge does. And then there is the possibility it will not go back to its original. So we want to protect it immediately. With that being said, your house wrap or your WRB, your weather resistant barrier, is already on the wall, and then the installation can occur at some period of time thereafter. One of the biggest things in most local codes, I know in my area, it's a code requirement throughout, is the use of a weep screed. Now, of course, you already have at least one layer of your WRB on the wall. However, the weep screed needs to be added, and it needs to be in the detail shown is tucked behind the actual WRB versus going on top, even with using a second layer of WRB. Now, I will say the weep screed goes on. It needs to meet the code for the height, which is 3.5 to 4 inches. And it can be anything from a vinyl weep screed or a galvanized weep screed, and it would be galvanized because the wire lath is going to be galvanized. We need to use the similar materials. Now, we're talking 2 layers of WRB. This is a recommendation from our industry. It's not always code. In a lot of states, it's not required. However, it's our recommendation because we like to see that the second layer be applied as a sacrificial layer to protect the first layer, so that it doesn't have any punctures, openings, or something further, which will allow moisture to penetrate even prior to the installation of all the other products and finished stone on the wall. With that being said, the 2 layers are going on the wall. And then right now, as you see in this diagram, there's wire lath being installed. And I'll go into a few more details in a few minutes here. But the wire lath, the recommendation is self-furring wire lath versus flat lath. And why self-furring? It's so that the mortar can get behind the wire lath and encapsulate the wire. Basically, it becomes a mortared wire reinforced scratch coat for long-term durability of the actual application of the scratch coat. If it's flat lath, you cannot get the encapsulation, and there's a potential, if you don't have proper moisture management, that we would have moisture trapped behind and degradation of that wire. Now, before I go forward, in our industry as NCMA and the manufactured stone veneer manufacturers get together, if you are using a drainage plane, and we do not have the requirement in most states to date, there's only 3 right now that I'm aware of that require a drainage plane, unfortunately. But if you are using a drainage plane, you can eliminate 1 layer of your WRB. So put your house wrap or your WRB on, then put a drainage plane and the wire over top of that. Most of the drainage planes that come out today, they are either a solid or a plastic material that is woven together, and it has a protective felt over top of it, so that when the mortar is applied, it does not clog the drainage, and it lets the moisture be moved as quickly as possible to keep the wall dry for as long as possible. The scratch coat is applied over top of the wire lath. Type N or Type S mortar. Type S is the most recent application or mortar that is recommended, and it's because most projects that we're seeing today are using site mixes, and we've seen, unfortunately, that the mixes are not strong enough or meeting the standards. So the recommendation is to go to Type S. Ultimately, as manufacturers, we'd prefer to see bag material being used so that they already have the mix, the proper mix accomplished by the manufacturer, and it gives a peace of mind for everybody. After your scratch coat goes on, a scarifier is used to create a rough surface or texture, and then the stone is adhered to the wall with a setting bed of Type N or Type S mortar, a 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch thick, pushed onto the wall, and then you have squeeze out, whether you have a grout application or a dry stack application, and you move forward for whatever your finish is going to be if you have to grout the joints. But I will say that ultimately, in a nutshell, is your standard application for a wood substrate. Getting into CMU, almost the same application, but as you see in this detail, as manufacturers, this is what is allowable in this picture with the detail. Does not have the presence of a WRB. We still recommend it, but because of the fact that a CMU is hollow, it acts as a drainage plane, and it acts as a moisture barrier, a moisture barrier to some extent. However, as manufacturers, we recommend that some sort of maybe a liquid membrane be applied over top of the block. Now, there are a couple of things I want to point out here when we're talking about it. If a block is clean, you can do direct adhesion of the scratch coat and the stone to the wall. It's not recommended because there's a potential that that CMU block wall will have some movement, which would create cracking in your mortar joints, and then the cracking would occur through the finished product. And that's why we follow the optional recommendation of a mechanically fastened wire lath to the CMU units. I did mention also that in some of the applications, and I'll talk about it shortly, is the use of modified mortars as well for some of these applications. But I wanted to make sure I mentioned that before I go forward. So in some of these different applications, but ultimately when it comes down to this particular slide here, we're talking about CMU, it's the same thing moving forward. If the wire lath is put on, then your scratch coat and your stone. Otherwise, if you have clean block, you can do your scratch coat on the wall or on the block, and then your adhesion of the stone or brick over top of it, and completing your grout, or if it's a dry stack application. And I mentioned cement board substrate due to a big gain in popularity due to the lack of labor available out there in the market. It's really been something new. The building inspectors are not aware of much of this, and we do, as manufacturers, have a lot of resources from a technical standpoint to offer you in the design community, as well as to the GCs and masons to help them walk through the process. But ultimately, this is really the modern version of what I've expressed previously of your traditional application, and it's panels that are put up on the wall, similar to your door rock that you would see in a bathroom or application shower, even in kitchens sometimes. But it's a concrete reinforced material, and it needs to be reinforced according to the ASTM C1325. It's basically a fiber reinforced material. The one interesting part with this product is there is actually a finished side that goes towards the studs and or towards the sheathing, and the other one that goes for the application of the stone. So this product needs to be installed over top of sheathing still. You cannot eliminate the sheathing and just put it direct to a stud application. And also, the one thing, according to the manufacturers of a cement board material, is it does require the use of modified mortars. And why is that? It's because they actually make the product with a WRB, or a moisture resistant barrier, in it, and you cannot get proper adhesion of a typical mortar to a cement board application. So the use of modified mortars is necessary in this application. However, it's very easy to install, and that's why it's become very popular in the labor situation that we're dealing with pretty much across the country. Talking about guidelines and moving forward, just to hit a few things. Hopefully, most of you are aware of this document here, but you can go on NCMA's site, which is ncma.org, and go under the resource section and download this document. This has become the industry standard for us. That is actually, I believe it's about 87 pages, and it's a very technical, detailed document of all the proper terminology in our industry. It has charts for all of the recommendations of different mortars and different applications. And then it has a tremendous amount of details in it that everything can be used and cut and paste so that you can put right into your documents, and you don't need to actually create your own details. You can customize a detail and then reach out to a high quality manufacturer in their technical department and have them review it. We typically, on our end, give recommendations, but will not do an actual detailed design for multiple purposes. But ultimately, there's quite a bit of resource material if you download this, and I would highly recommend, if you're spec stone on a regular basis, is to download this and put it on your desktop. And there are updates. The most recent update was January of last year. So look for the latest edition as you're going on their site. Just a few hints when we're talking about our WRBs, or our weather resistant barriers. It's 15-pound If you're using a jumbo text material or a grade D paper, it's a 10-minute, which is the grade D, and it meets the ASTM standards that you see in the bullet points here, but it's a 15-pound material. We're recommending 2 layers, so 15 and 15 is 30. You get a contractor that says that they use 30-pound roof felt material, it's not acceptable. One, because it doesn't meet the same ASTM standards, but it does not have the same makeup of fibers and asphalt, or just like a house wrap that has another ASTM equivalent or standard. It does not allow proper breathability and protection of the wall surface. So just a few pitfalls that are out there when the contractors are talking, whether it's to a GC that doesn't have the proper knowledge. There's certain reasons, or there's particular reasons why the ASTM standards are what they are, and the proper use of those materials, in particular when we're layering the WRBs. Not to make it as a given, but installed from the bottom up, and always an overlap in the application of the vertical and the horizontal button of joints, and overlap so that we have proper moisture management. There's the one point here in double rolls are not acceptable. It's basically a double rolls that they don't use it properly as it's intended. So we don't recommend, or the practice is not to accept double roll applications of WRB for the asphalt application. Most recently, this has become very popular in our industry, and I'm sure you've seen it with other materials, especially when it comes to eaves. Most of us have been around quite a while. I've been around a while from back when we had a lot of moisture problems, because there was not the communication between the eaves industry and our industry, and we were having button of the details, and the moisture barriers were the biggest problem, as well as the transitions. A lot of liquid WRBs are being used today. They are coming from the manufacturers themselves. I personally highly recommend the use of it. It is ease of installation, which cuts down on the labor cost. It's a little bit more from a material cost, but ultimately it's most efficient, and we know the labor is more of the cost than the actual materials are long-term when you do any analysis. But ultimately, it's still installed as layers, and it's self-sealing, so it's become very popular, and the warranties are phenomenal for everything of the application, or for everyone. When it comes to fasteners, as I'm moving along here with this product, there's no one recommended, and there's multiple different types you can use. The first one is not even a fastener, but to talk about metal lath, there are 2 different weights, the 2.5 or 3.5 that are acceptable. 2.5 is very normal, but depending upon it, does not matter which one is used. However, when it comes down to the wire lath or the material, there are standards to meet, and also to talk about. It's basically, so going back to, is making sure that in wire lath applications that the product is the self-furring wire lath. But ultimately, for the fasteners, nails, staples, screws, they're all acceptable. A lot of what we're seeing today is the staple application with the pneumatic guns. Nails do the same thing as well, but with staples, you have 2 penetration points and the crown distributes the weight. So if we have any concern from a weight standpoint, it's offset with the use, or the recommendation, or the discussion of using staple fasteners. With wire lath, the product must be installed horizontally, never vertically. That's a requirement by the manufacturers. And there is actually a top and a bottom to it. So if you were to have this piece, and when I'm doing this presentation in person, I have a sample. If you run your hand down the lath, it is smooth. And if you run it up, it's like a cheese grater. That's the proper application of wire lath when it's the self-furring material. And why is that? The cup system in the self-furring allows for the maximum penetration of the mortar through the cups to do the actual integration of the mortar behind, so it's totally encapsulating the wire, or it's maximizing the encapsulation of the wire. Two key points is never is the recommendation or the use of fasteners in the wall stud itself. The fasteners should only be installed where there's a structural stud member, and most manufacturers from metal lath make it very easy. They have these orange lines that go horizontally, and a penetration is only necessary every 6 to 7 inches, not that they're going wild and it's every 2 to 3 inches going through down the stud or down the wire lath into the stud. So it is engineered quite a bit, and they make it very easy for the installation practices. But unfortunately, when some of this material is installed, there is a belly or a bump in the material due to just usually the ineffectiveness or unskilled labor. And they try and get rid of that bump by putting a fastener right in where the wall cavity is, which could end up potentially leading to a moisture problem. So that's why it's very noteworthy to make sure the time is being spent to install this as flat as possible and only into a structural member. This discussion on mortar, as I talked about type N and type S, this table right here was pulled right out of the NCMA guide. So it's just one of the many resources that are available to you in that guidelines. I just want to call out one thing, and it recently was implemented or recommended, as you'll see through the middle of this chart here, is with the installation of any type of veneer on a commercial building. The recent, not necessarily a requirement, but recommendation is any application of 10 feet or higher is the use of modified mortars. Why is that? We want to make sure that the stone is adhered as long as possible, but with modified mortars, it has the best adhesion, guarantee or confidence that the stone is going to stay on the wall. And when we get to higher elevations, we're trying to eliminate any delamination of material. And most failures that are going to occur on a cladding like this is the mortar that is behind the stone and added and used to adhere to the actual scratch coat itself. Unfortunately, and you'll be hearing more on that if you're attending the next presentation on Laticrete, but modified mortars are becoming more and more recommended in this industry for multiple reasons. However, some of the most applications that do not require or don't necessarily need some of the modified mortars, you can use the same mortar, a type N or type S mortar, for your scratch coat, your setting bed, as well as your grout joints. Two things here, and I'm not sure if you can tell by the slides, but if you look at that scratch coat, there's like spider web cracking. That's what we're trying to eliminate. If the mix design is not as strong as it should be, when it cures out, it's going to spider web crack there. And that's why we're going to recommend that the type S mortar be used, which is going to a stronger strength mortar to hopefully eliminate that spider web cracking. And just a couple other things with the setting bed, a full bed of mortar on the back of the stone. This individual has not completed it yet, but he is adding the proper thickness of a 1/2 inch to 5/8 of mortar, but we need 100% coverage on the back. Most failures with delamination are to improper coverage of the mortar on the back of the stone. Two of the other situations are if it's too warm out and the mortar doesn't cure properly, or if it's too cold out and the mortar basically crystallizes and freezes, which the modified mortars can help with those situations as well, which you'll hear in the next presentation. And then ultimately the grouting of mortars with the standard mortar joints. Never use modified mortar for grouting. It's next to impossible. If not, it is impossible to use due to its stickiness or its strength of the product and workability. It has its specific intentions and goals, and one is not to use it as a grout joint. Modified mortars, I absolutely love them. It gives you a lot of confidence. I say it's basically a security blanket. And as you see from the right side of this slide, there are multiple conditions that I already talked about, especially when we're talking about residential applications with poured in place foundations, even commercial, any type of a foundation that is poured in place. They are using forms that are coated with a petroleum-based release agent. And when that is used, we cannot get proper adhesion of a standard mortar to that surface area because of that petroleum. So that's where we highly recommend, or say with all confidence, use modified mortars if that construction is used. Same would be with the tilt-up construction. They're still using those release agents. We talked about the cement board, and then I talked about the conditions. And lastly, large format stones has become very popular in the industry. You're getting 8x16, 12x24. We have an 8x37 out in the market. They still meet the ASTM standards, but the recommendation from our industry is the use of modified mortars that meet the ANSI 118.4 or 118.15. I particularly call that bullet point out because there are a lot of inferior modified mortars out there that are not designed, one, for the ANSI standard, or two, for the use of stone installation. They could work with tile in an interior application or other materials, but there are particular ANSI standards when it comes to stone, which will be discussed more as we've been talking about. Most applications, as just from this slide, and it's a point of notice, are installed from the bottom up. There still are the old masons out there that are installing from the top down. However, they're few and far between, but the recommendation in most cases is to have it installed, have the stone installed from the bottom up for multiple reasons. This slide is in here, one, just to call out or to let everybody know that high quality manufacturers not only manufacture flat units, but they manufacture 90-degree corners. Every one of our brands has all their profiles available now in 90-degree corners. And why we say that is, please specify that the manufacturer's corners be used, because if it's not, the contractors love to manufacture their own corners. Aesthetically, they don't look as well. From a moisture management standpoint, they don't perform as well. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, and this is an aesthetic, concrete has zero strength. If you were to cut it to a point to create a 90-degree, long-term, you're going to have some movement. You're going to have some failure in the actual product if they're manufactured on site. So I just want to, just some pitfalls that we've seen out on the job sites is, please specify the manufacturer's corner units be used. I talked about large format, and I said it a few minutes ago with the use of modified mortars. The product is still meeting the ASTM standard, that it will be under the 15 pounds per square foot. These typical units are in the area of about 3/4 to an inch thick. They may be slightly thicker, but they still meet the standards, and they accomplish the goals, which of course, in most cases, they're starting to simulate a limestone material. I will talk about the grout joints in a second here, but the product, please, you can have all the confidence that the product performs just like all the standard materials. Even though they're large, they meet all the ASTM standards and recommendations. This one here, and when we're talking about the grout joints and techniques, please, every job should have a mock-up on it. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, the stone can go up on the wall. Grout joints have a large impact on the finish. So what we see in some pictures and then what goes up on the wall can be totally different. So we highly recommend as manufacturers that the specifications require a mock-up, whether it's something of a small mock-up that is on a wall of the structure being built, just to make sure everybody's in agreement, because we don't want to get into the point where somebody's agreed to a photo and then when it comes down to it, the color changes on the grout that's used, which does have a dramatic impact on the finish. It has an impact on the coloring of the stone itself as well. And then getting into the dry stack applications that you see, it just has a totally different look on the stone. In particular, talking about overgrout, nothing has more of an impact than overgrout. Standard joint thickness, and this has been something that AIA has asked us to bring about in our presentations. The industry has created a standard at a 1/2 inch joint. 1/2 inch is the thickness, a standard thickness of a joint. It's on a lot of some manufacturers' actual packaging. And why we bring this up is because we hear the story that we didn't get enough yield of square footage in the packaging. But that has been a standard, just like some of these different technical resources that are out there. Half inch, we may not agree with it from certain applications. Quite often I see people's faces change quite a bit when we're having this, talking about the half-inch joint. So again, it's not saying that it's required, it's just that's become an industry standard, in particularly during packaging. The overgrout joints, as I said, the impact that it can have from the aesthetic look. And then dry stack applications. This picture has been implemented, and it's one that I want to bring up right away. This is a large format stone for the dry stack application. We do not recommend this anymore. There is old literature out in the industry that you can dry stack large formats. We are now with the recommendation, and hopefully you would have installation guidelines that say it, that it have a minimum of 1/4 to 3 inches of a thick joint. And why is that? Because we found through time and through some trials and tribulations that with the large units, we ended up having some pinch points, and they were actually cracking or breaking of the actual stone. So just want to mention, there's anything but the large format can be dry stack application as long as the stone's profile accepts it, but not with large formats, please. I'm just going to take a break here. I'm not sure, Sean, I see some chat, but if we have any questions that you think are necessary to bring up right away, feel free to mention them. If not, I will proceed on with the presentation. Okay.
Hey,
If
Paul, this is
Go ahead.
Chris. Can you do me a favor and elaborate a little bit on your packaging and the fact that some of it is square footage that calls out dry stack method, and some of it is square footage including a mortar joint, and how they need to make sure they get that clearly called out?
Yes, so it pretty much alludes to, if we say that the packaging is 50 square feet based upon a 1/2 inch joint, it literally does not have 50 square feet of material in there. If that product can be dry stacked, the contractor needs to take into account the square footage that is consumed by the mortar to grout joint and order additional material. So not all brands have it, but there is a brand in particular that we manufacture. It says 100 square feet with a 1/2 inch mortar joint. There are, if you see a product that is just can only be installed, which would be one of a manufacturer's panel systems. Panel systems never have a grout joint. It's going to have the actual full 100 square feet in that packaging versus trying to factor whether it has the grout joint, the 1/2 inch yield put into it or factored into the yield of material that's in the boxing. So hopefully
This is a situation that we had occur where we've had it happen a number of times, and the specification wasn't fully borne out when they were writing it, and the architect thought that that was a dry stack product, and it wasn't a dry stack product, and vice versa. And what ended up happening was it was found out in the due diligence that the contractors did not quote enough material, so it threw everything out of whack on the numbers. So be sure that you understand when specifying any of these manufactured stone, or really natural stone also, what your intentions are, and make sure that product fits with either having a joint or being a dry stack. So it only takes a second, whoever your supplier is, when you're talking to me or any of my team, or Sean or anybody else, it's really important that you have that in your mind on what you want, so that expectations meet the reality when it comes to bid time and everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. So just from the essence of time, I'm going to keep moving forward here on some of these my slides, and probably just keep going and finish up and then get questions at the end. But just to talk about some methods, I won't really go down bullet points moving forward, but we talked about moisture management and barriers. It's just to make sure, and drainage planes and rain screens. There's some of the old systems that are out there, and today the new versions are out. Again, they're not required, but unfortunately, they're not required. Most exterior cladding systems have the requirement of a drainage plane. It is moving forward. We've seen it change. Pennsylvania just implemented it. So I know we're talking with Florida, but you're going to be designing throughout other areas of the country. Is just try and keep up, or make sure you keep up with this drainage plane as it moves forward. It's necessary, and it is coming to a fruition, in our opinion, in a relatively near future, that a rain screen will be required, or a drainage plane will be required in the relatively near future. We don't care what type of material, as long as it meets the ASTM standards. And ultimately, we're trying to keep the wall dry. As you see with this system, it's openings at the top and the bottom, so we have airflow and keeps the wall system as dry as possible. We talked about pretty much everything already with CMU tilt up and poured walls. A couple points with detailing, particularly with retaining walls and moisture management. A few things I'll call out here. The back of the wall is making sure we have some sort of a drainage system with the clean stone to divert any moisture that would be trapped. You get hydrostatic pressure, and it's going to come to the forefront of the wall and show at the stone. At the top of the wall is whatever cap is being used. Most of them are customized. Is make sure we have a minimum of a 1-inch overhang beyond the finished surface of the stone, so the water is dripping in front of the stone and not rolling behind. And then at the bottom, and this is for retaining walls only, I'll talk about a building structure clearance, but the industry standard, even natural thin veneer and brick veneers had come into this agreement today or recently, is the use of the clearance of a 1/2 inch to a finished or paved surface, or 2 inches to grade. There are plenty of ways to work with this so it doesn't aesthetically show that it's floating, but this is necessary so we do not have direct contact and basically act as a sponge. Our products are designed to absorb moisture and release them, but not be sitting in moisture for an extended period or all the time. So that's two things I want to call out, or multiple things I want to call out from a retaining wall application. We were on this call earlier talking about continuous insulation. Our systems can be used with total confidence over continuous insulation. It gets into a whole nother presentation, but it comes down to engineering, whether it's in-house at your firm or outside third party, which we can help you or assist you with a third party engineer. But it ultimately boils down to the thickness of the insulation. The engineer designs what actual fastener, calls out the manufacturer, and calls out the length and thickness of the fastener as well as the spacing of the fasteners. The one thing I will say here is if a project has this application, the contractors need to be made aware of this, because it does come with a cost with these fasteners, and the brand specific, because there's a lot of inferior materials out there, but it can be done with total confidence. I can tell you, in my experience, we have done an engineered system over 4 inches of insulation up in the north with total confidence, and it is still has no problems today to date, and it's been up for quite a few years. So it is easily accomplished, and certainly reach out. We have the resources to help you if you're dealing with continuous insulation. Just again, this is a nice, pretty detail. Just some of the codes. You have to follow the residential and the commercial building. We follow that, and that's all we will really say about that from a height standpoint. Haven't seen any restrictions from the commercial, as much commercial as we do. There are some restrictions, and I would say refer to your local codes. Resources, you should be able to go on any high quality manufacturer site and download the library in any of the different formats. This has become a very concerted effort that we've done recently as manufacturers to make it easy for you in the design community. Go on and download any of the colors and profiles so you can integrate them right into your drawings. We were behind the 8 ball, but we caught up with that, and we're glad to make you aware of it so you don't have to spend your own resources doing this. Support. High quality manufacturers should have support to help you from the time you're doing the design to that stone goes on the wall and finished. I can tell you from our standpoint, we can supply you with language with some of these changes to incorporate right into your specifications. We can also supply you with the labor to be on site for pre-construction meetings with members of our organization, and we can be there during the process to do an inspection. Some projects do not have construction management, unfortunately, due to various reasons. We can be out there and be the eyes and ears for you and give you a little bit more confidence. If you have questions on that, certainly reach out to us to get into the specifics of it. And it's all done at no cost. It's all for the sustainability, really, from our industry, is to offer this to you, a resource to the design community and to your owners. I'm going to move forward with this just from questions and just finalize some of this information with some detailing. Water table sills do not meet ASTM standards because of their thickness. The recommendation is to have a mechanically fastened, not necessary, but recommendation, mechanically fastened L bracket at the bottom and fasten it into the wall to distribute some of the weight. And the other one I want to call out is never caulk the transition of the siding to the water table sill. Allow that moisture to get out on top of the flashing, put the caulk underneath the flashing that is going to be in contact with the water table sill. But here's one where I will tell you, I recommend is using modified mortar where a water table is being installed on the 4-inch area, which is going to adhere to the scratch coat to just help distribute some of that weight and have the confidence to keep that water table sill on. You're not going to have a problem with standard water table sills, but some manufacturers are making these units up to 6 inches thick. They become lean-tos and they pop off the wall. Weep screed, this is your clearance recommendation for a building, is 2 inches to a finished or paved surface and 4 inches to grade. If you put that weep screed in, stone installed above it, and you want to go below and you still have a higher application of more than your grade is down almost a foot or more, you can still continue down below that weep screed where the transition from the foundation to the framing members of the floor, but is actually make sure that you have a grade or a clearance at grade or a paving application. Again, talking about the clearances, mortar expansion joints, our products cannot bridge over any vertical or horizontal applications. I just want to call out here, probably one of the ugliest pictures that I can pull, that we pulled up, and it's there for a reason. It can get better than this, but this is prefabricated hotel that came in. And of course, there's a large expansion joint in the horizontal expansion there, but there are a lot of workarounds, so it does not look this bad, but we still cannot bridge over. We don't have a recommendation of what type of expansion joint finish to come through. There's multiple different applications, but please do not bridge over or have a design. It's there for a reason. And there is no recommendation from our industry on how much distance you have before you need to have an expansion joint. It's all dictated by the building. Moisture prevention, ultimately, we have this picture with how much detail with the flashings and the roof lines and the siding and whatnot and all the retaining walls. Is just follow the recommendations as we saw on the slides earlier. We don't want to have something like this with moisture trapped, creating secondary efflorescence, which is on the left, and spalling, which is some harsh chemicals in some harsh environments due to freeze and ice and whatnot with some of the chemicals that were unfortunately splattered on the stone. And then protective treatments, not necessary, but if you're looking to use it, please consider that it needs to be a penetrating, breathable sealer and not a petroleum-based material, so you allow the stone to breathe. This is pretty much wrapping up our best practices with manufactured stone veneer. Hopefully I've met all the objectives for you in the 4 different categories. And with that, I will say thank you for attending the presentation. And if there are any questions out there, we will take them at this time. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. This is Wendy Johnson again with AIA Florida. So he's still online. If you guys have any questions and want to type them in to the questions and answers box, he can monitor those and answer them. And a reminder, if you have any questions for staff, you can put them in the Q&A box as well. We do have another presentation that will be starting in a few minutes. We're actually technically going to start it at 1:10 because we may have some folks that are going to be joining us, so we want to give them time to get in. And if you're not going to be staying with us, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And as a reminder, we will have all the material and as well as a recording of this presentation available on our website in a few days. And you'll also receive an email from us with the presentation material, so you can refer back to that if you'd like. So I think we're going to go ahead and get our next presenter set up. So everybody just take a break and we'll start back at about 1:10. So Anita, I think you might be able to just take over.
Okay.
There you are.
When it's in full screen mode. Can you see it?
Yeah, but that's not, it's showing its presentations mode.
Okay, let me try stop sharing and reshare.
No, you go ahead and do it. And if it comes up again, do duplicate screen. There should be options up in the upper left.
There we go. See, when you run 3 screens, what are we seeing? Same thing?
Yeah, so if you go in display settings, I think if you drop down, do that drop down. Is it on the upper left of your screen?
What about the underneath the actual slide? There looks like there's a screen there next to the magnifying glass.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, that's not it.
Nope. I'm
Okay.
watching it on.
If you go up to the top where it says display settings, do that drop down and see if that gives you the option.
And we just had this going too. Okay, I'm going to stop share. Let me get this one out of presentation mode. Try it again. Let's switch my screen, moving things around. Are you still seeing the big one or the small one?
It looks
Yep,
good.
that's it.
Okay. All right. I just had to keep switching screens between the one, 2, and 3. Something will work eventually. I'm just going to make sure I can advance it. Yep. Okay.
Now that you're set up, I want to see, Paul, are you still out there? Because I just looked and 2 questions popped up on us here.
I am.
External application materials have a discoloration problem. Can you review those oxides again and how that's protection against that issue?
So it's a little bit of a broad discoloration of the actual stone itself is I guess what's being talked
I
about.
think so. It just said, did you know if in external application materials had discoloration problems?
So materials can, if you're not using high quality manufactured stone with the pigment that we're talking about, you can have basically a fading situation go on depending upon exposures. So that is one situation, and one way to try and minimize that would be some sort of a protective sealant on it. I wouldn't recommend it, but there is some issues with that. If that addresses the question, if products can, unfortunately, from some manufacturers, have a difference of coloring. So it's really as soon as it comes out of the box, if somebody notices something, say something right away. Just like these advertisements out there, if you see something, say something. and reach out to a representative immediately before it goes up on the wall to try and minimize that. But low quality pigment will have that issue where it can fade or it won't be consistent.
I think it was probably pretty common in any kind of cementitious-based product for a long time, and probably 15 or 20 years ago, they started focusing on natural oxides,
Correct.
which are color fast, and they're
Color.
very resilient to the elements and give you a much more stable product. I mean, we produce a ton of split face and architectural grade CMUs, pavers, all sorts of products, and we had the same issue until we went to those oxides. So I think your point about a good quality manufacturer really hits home, and you guys definitely have that. And then the last one was someone requesting the NCMA manual discussed. I think we had Sean had posted something in the chat about that.
He posted
So-
about, yeah, I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, he had posted something previously about a link to be able to send it to everybody, or he would distribute it to them. So
Well, I mentioned ncma.org under the resource section, or you can go on eldoradostone.com, go under the resource section, and I think it's in technical and installation, and you can download it from there.
Okay.
Yeah, there's plenty of resources to pick that up.
yeah, I'm looking back in his things that he already posted, and I think that's what he posted in there. So that's just another one coming down in there again. Yeah, host and panel. Yep, I think it's in here. So, okay, that's it. I think we're in pretty good shape for questions. And then we'll be starting at 1:10 with the second presentation. Paul, thank you very much. It was a great job. And if you can hang out in case there's any questions about your product when we're talking, when Anita's talking, it'd be great. But thank you very much. Great job.
My pleasure. Thank you. Yes, and I'm sticking around for Anita's.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we do have everybody ready, I think, to get started in a couple minutes. And if we do have anybody that's just joining us, we want to just welcome you to our second of two presentations today brought to us with the masonry folks. And as a reminder, I just put a link to this presentation in the chat, so you can get on that link and you can download the material and have it as reference. But that link will also be in an email that you'll receive after the webinar. You'll get that tomorrow. We'll also put the recordings for both presentations on our website, so you'll have that as well for reference. And a couple people have asked about their AIA credit. If you have registered, if you're logged into this webinar, we have your information. So we have, if you provided your member number, we have that. Obviously, we have your email. And for any AIA members, we will submit the AIA credit to them for you. So you don't have to worry about that. We'll take her to look at the report. We'll know when you logged in, when you logged out, so we can use that for your records. Anybody that needs a certificate of completion, please send our assistant Hillary an email. And again, her email address is in the chat, and it will also be in the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. So I think that's all the housekeeping that I wanted to go over. Again, this is being recorded and everybody's in listen only mode, but you are able to talk to the speaker through the question and answer box. So you can type in your questions. Also, if you have questions for staff, you can put them there as well. All right, I think that's everything. Anita, take it away.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Anita Hellickson with Laticrete. I am our Senior National Hospitality Account Manager. I cover the entire US and Canada. So thank you for participating in this presentation. It's going to be on exterior wall systems for adhered veneers, air barriers, rain screens, and continuous insulation. Oh my. So if, throughout this presentation, by all means, type in the questions into the chat. And also, if you feel throughout this presentation at the end that your office would like a lunch presentation on products and project solutions, by all means, you have my contact information here. It will be displayed at the end of the presentation. I would love to come and meet with you and present a lunch presentation for your office. So let's get started. Or maybe not. Okay. For this presentation, there is one learning unit for health, safety, and welfare. Copyright materials, got to take and post this one. Well, let's get started. In this AIA, we will look at both traditional and more modern ways of installation systems, Going over performance understanding, we'll go over some of the newer technologies available and how they'll work together as systems. What does a thin veneer system look like? Air barriers, brain screens, the continuous insulation, detailing, the many types of system products, design options, approval, testing, and certifications. So we'll talk starting off with the traditional systems, the older system. This is the way it was done. What does a veneer system look like? Well, the traditional system looks like this: 2 layers of building paper, 1 layer used for weather resistant barrier, WRB, and the other layer is sacrificial. The WRB is installed with staples, nails, and screws, as you can see in the image. Metal lath is installed over the WRB and is also put up the same way with staples, nails, and screws, then floated and filled with the type S mortar to a 1/2 inch. Then stone is adhered with the same type S mortar. So how does moisture and air move through this system? The finished material, the veneers, may provide some bulk water management. Many of these finishes allow water to wick through the substrate. Some of the substrates allow water to wick through them as well, like the type S mortar and lath system. This exposes the fasteners, metals, and other products to long-term moisture. This also allows for any air leakage to draw in moisture into the wall cavity more easily, since the moisture is allowed to the back of the substrate. This could lead to issues like rusting, mildew, mold, air infiltration, and maybe freeze-thaw issues as well. So newer systems are being developed to manage moisture and air more effectively. The new systems can reduce the carbon-robbing energy losses and recycling costs of buildings by providing superior performances. Okay, so then we go into the changes. So code changes. In 2010, the ASHRAE had 90.1 standard to increase the energy savings of a building with the use of continuous air barrier systems. Who has heard of all of these new changes? No one's going to say anything because we're all muted, or used any of these new requirements. Yes, we are trying as a society to improve our use of better, greener materials to lower our carbon footprint in the building and performance of our buildings by making our building more energy efficient, by lowering our consumption of fossil fuels and electricity, with the strong goals by the end of 2030 and 2050. Okay. I think I've got different slides. So the outboard, when the air barriers were introduced into code, there were new systems that were developed as well. This was first innovated system developed for thin adhered veneers was air and water barrier that is load bearing. This replaces the old system earlier. This allowed for thin adhered veneers to be adhered directly with adhesive mortar to a bondable air barrier system. The new system would keep air and moisture from entering wall cavity space without any penetrations, protecting all the fasteners utilizing a concrete backer board, CBB, instead of a metal lath and scratch as well. This increased the performance of the system and the speed of the installation. The newer system is used in buildings that do not require use of drainage plane, outboard insulations, and where they have an R value needed for a wall system. Air barrier system. When the air barriers were introduced into code, there were new systems that were developed as well. This was the first innovative system developed for thin adhered veneers, an air and water barrier that is load bearing. This replaced the old system shown earlier. This allowed for thin adhered veneers to be adhered directly with an adhesive mortar to be a bondable air barrier system. The new system would keep air and moisture from entering the wall cavity without any penetrations, protecting the fasteners and utilizing a concrete backer board instead of the metal lath and scratch as well. This increased the performance of the system and speed of the installation. The newer system is used in buildings that do not require the use of drainage plane, outboard insulation, or where they have an R value needed for wall systems. Managing moisture. What is the number one cause of building issues? So before we go to the next steps, here's the question. What is the most damaging things to the building structures? The answer is water and moisture, of course. Moisture can cause thousands of dollars of damage and the number one cause of issues in buildings today. So we need to be detailed in the design and calculations of the project. So air barriers. So there's different types of air barriers. So a quote from the web on what an air barrier is. Here are some of the types of air barriers that can be used in the designs. I'm just gonna pop them all up. Peel and stick with primers. Some do not require. We have wraps, spray foam, liquid applied air barriers. With the peel and stick and wraps, can you imagine putting up wallpaper outside? You need to make sure it is wrinkle free and taped well to avoid leaks. Any wrinkles can cause a leak. Spray foams can make a great insulator, but limits the finish for thin adhered veneers and thin clad materials. With the spray foam systems, you may have to go with a more costly system that are supported by concrete, headers, and lintels, engineered steel. The liquid air barriers are seamless and are installed quickly, allowing for many types of finishes to be installed. So permeability. So here are the different classes of air barriers based on the permeability. To decide what type of air barrier is needed, an analysis is done by modeling the design in a program. This program will help develop and determine how moisture will move through a wall design, and is also based on the location and climate. One of these programs is called the WUFI, a German acronym here. Typically in a commercial construction, we use a class 2 and 3 air barrier, except in certain conditions, steam showers and such. These areas will need different treatments to handle excessive moistures. Dehumidifiers or class 1 air barriers, or both, may be needed as well. So 1-inch leak. Let's discuss moisture, air, and a little on what's going on with our construction. In this example is a sheet of exterior rated gypsum sheathing. In one annual cooling and heating cycle of a 4x8 sheet of exterior rated sheathing can allow for about 1/3 cup of moisture through as water vapor. Wow, that's a lot of water coming through that gypsum sheathing. But what if we had a leak? Now put a 1-inch hole in the same sheathing. How much moisture can get past it now? As you can see, we're getting, depending on your location and the average humidity, it can range from 30 to 90 times more moisture through that wall system. That's a lot of moisture. I'm popping this up. So to control your air, think of an air barrier like a balloon placed around your building. Keep warm air out, cool air in, and then keep a cool air out and warm air in, depending on what time of year it is. The air barrier needs to be complete and cover the whole building. Then put in the HVAC, windows, doors, and all kinds of penetrations in the structure. The air barrier needs to be complete and cover the whole building. Make sure that it is well designed and detailed to make sure all ducts, every window, every door, and every penetration is flashed correctly. This is part of the design for the HVAC system to work better, so the building can be more efficient in heating, cooling, removing, and/or moisture into the structure. So I'm just going to pop up. If there's any questions, please type them into the chat. We'll be glad to answer those for you.
Right now, we haven't had anything come up, so everything's going well.
Okay, perfect. Well, hopefully you're all enjoying lunch, and after the first one and you're trying to bear through the second one, we're hanging in there. Okay, details are important, right? We've all heard the devil is in the details. They're very complicated and very detailed. When detailing, we need to make sure that we look at all the connections. What we want to make sure that the air barrier system perform as we need them to, not only for permeability, but also for continuity. Now, these systems may also need to include drainage planes, continuous insulation as well, and we'll discuss them a little bit more. So the details. Make sure that the air barrier is connected to the components that is required by the window manufacturer for air tightness. Headers, bucks, and sills also need to be detailed correctly for air tightness. Are all windows the same? No. Just like, is every window the same or wall the same? No. There are hundreds of different types of windows and all have different details. So door details. The same applies to doors as well, headers, bucks, and sills. So when you're working with your roof details from the manufacturer to see how the detail from the roof to the wall, it changes from every roof to roof and on what is the best way to detail them. Base of the wall and floor to floor. Also consider your wall to wall, floor to floor, all those details again with continuity of an air barrier. As we mentioned, the devil's in the details. A lot of detail need to go into each application. So other areas to detail, all the little things that we run through all the wall, all the pipes for the plumbing, the electrical, the AC ducts, and the vents as well. So all parts of a system. Let's look at all the parts and pieces. You got the roof, the window, the partition walls, interior walls, ceilings, technical equipment, columns, exterior wall underground, foundation, exterior wall above ground, balconies, so many components. So the pencil test. If your pencil lifts, it's a leak in your air and water barrier. System with air barriers and drainage planes. With the ASHRAE 90.1 2010, we now have air barriers. Other challenges we'll need to discuss is the drainage and ways to manage water. We also have the consideration of the condensation that may happen and can change with the seasons. With air barriers, we must consider the permeability or perm rating for where the building is being constructed and how the wall is being designed. Drainage plane types. Many types are here, but a few different types of these drainage planes. Job site made with furring strips to concrete drainage, typically made with wood, moisture in wood, swelling equals movement. EIFS field applied with mortar ribbons. Could these be smashed or flattened during installation? Then we have the pre-made plastic ribbed. Then we have the Brillo pad look, the Brillo pad with ribs. These are both high compressible plastics, and some are made with recyclable plastic materials as well, for green as a specification and lower carbon use. The dimple or the cone type, these are just a few of the different drainage plane / rain screen types of products that are out on the market. So why is a drainage plane needed in these systems that we have today? We all know that buildings leak and condensation will also happen at different times of year. Therefore, we need to design with that in mind for our projects. This can help the system by allowing the system to drain and dry at the inner sheathing area. to allow less stress on the air barrier system. Then by using a bulk water management of the stone or finished material and the exterior bulk water and crack isolation membrane to slow or stop bulk water from entering the entire system. But if it did leak at the penetration, it will still have to get past the drainage plane and the primary air barrier. The older systems allow any bulk water to soak through the entire system to the air barrier or the WRB and sit. Then we also must be concerned with rain. What will happen with the system when it rains? By using a bulk water management of the stone and finished material in the exterior bulk water and crack isolation membrane to slow and stop the bulk water from entering the system. Again, if it did leak out of penetration, it'll still have to get past that drainage plane as the primary air barrier. There we go. And what will happen in the system? Again, rain, here we go. We're looking at that bulk water and it can be absorbed through the system. Yes, it still can be managed by the drainage plane, but what also it also does is allow moisture to do. It can start to rust on the fasteners and other metals in the system, efflorescence, and maybe freeze thaw effects. Somebody liked using a lot of pop-ups in these screens. What else will happen in the system when it rains? Again, this is the bulk water and it can be absorbed through the system. Yes, it still can be managed by that drainage plane. But what it does is allow moisture to do. It can start, again, that rusting on fasteners and other metal materials, efflorescence, the freeze thaw. By adding the bulk water management layer behind the stone and the finished material, there are many benefits. With the bulk management layer, water will be slowed down or stop bulk water from entering the entire system. This will also help the crack isolation and vapor drive to help keep more moisture from stressing the primary air barrier. But if it did leak at the penetrations or other area, it will still be handled by the drainage plane and the primary air barrier. In the previous presentation, talking about continuous insulation, you all have heard of it. I'm sure you all have specified it. And it's a big part of what was being designed today, driven by the code changes, government mandates to the ASHRAE 90.1 has changed, and the designs of construction. Okay, with ASHRAE 90.1, 2013, we now have air barriers and continuous insulation to consider in our designs. We discussed some of the reasons for drainage and ways of managing moisture. Now we need to include continuous insulation. We need to design for thickness of insulations needed. Designs can range from 1 inch to 6 inches, depending on where the building is located, in the thickness of foam and fasteners that will hold and support the assembly. We'll discuss these systems in the upcoming slides. Okay, yes, wrapping your building with continuous insulation to increase the R value and move the insulation R value layer further out into the wall system. We also need to be concerned and limit the thermal transfer in the wall system. We'll have to use metal Z flashings and other large metal transitions with the use of insulators. We can also do some of the systems with engineered screws and fasteners. Then we need to design the CI, continuous insulation, to work with our exterior wall cladding. There are many types of insulation to be used on the outside of your building. Here are a few of some. From the rock wall to different types of foam boards to spray foams. There are now foam boards with drainage built into them. There are foam boards with drainage that will save a step by adding the drainage plane instead of a separate component. Then we have some concrete backer boards with a foam or drainage combination. These systems are saving 2 steps for the thin adhered veneers you'll be using. Again, the details are important. When building with continuous insulation, we'll need to consider all that will go into the design. Where's the building being built? How thick does the continuous insulation material need to be for the R value? What air barrier is needed and the placement of it? What is the finish type? The attachments and returns to windows, doors, flashings, etc. need to be in the detailed drawings. Did anybody have any questions about any of these details that we are seeing? As you can see, very intricate.
Yes, there is a question that popped up. Anita, the detail for continuous insulation showed batt between the studs. Does this create a dew point within the cavity wall? This is something that we deal with in Florida all the time. Typically, most of the analysis we've done show the dew point being outside of your vapor barrier. In Florida, we can run a dew point analysis specific to your zip code. If you want to, I'll put in, Vicky, I'll respond to you with my my email, and you can send over the information on your particular job. But Anita, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, you're good.
Yeah, we run into that a lot because we're obviously dealing with a very there's a lot of moisture in the air in Florida. So that's something we run into quite a bit. We typically have very good success with it when you're doing it and you're running it through with the cavity wall and how you want to run everything through. But we can go ahead and run the specific analysis to your zip code. So Vicky, I just sent that directly to you, but everyone, I'll post it also for the whole group. It's Chris Bettinger at oldcastle.com, and I'll post that in here for everybody here now. So perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, again, all these details are very important. As I mentioned previously, when you're doing your roof, your walls, your windows, your doors, etc. So then bulk water plus insulation without bulk water management, and then with bulk water and crack isolation membranes. Using without the same bulk water management system discussed earlier, moisture travels through the entire system. Yes, moisture is continuing to move through those wall cavities. Some insulation products can lose some R values when wet. By using a bulk water management system, it will allow for all those great benefits as previously discussed. As you can see, all the details in this layer using the bulk water management and crack isolation membrane. So then we get into some testing and compatibility. A lot of numbers here, a lot of acronyms. So when these new systems have new testing that may be required as well. So the AC 212 is a testing criteria for air barrier products that has an array of testing for air leakage, permeability, crack isolation, nail sealability, aging, and more. Then we get into the ASTM E2357 is the assemblies test for an air barrier system. I'm into NFPA 285. That's the testing for the fire code for a building using foam plastics over 40 feet high. TAS 202 and 203 are actually hurricane testing, negative and positive wind loads, and ballistic projectiles. ASTM E84 is the smoke flame spread of a product and has a class structure of A, B, and C, with A being the least smoke and flame spread. ASTM E1354 is a test that produces a value for engineers to evaluate a product versus what was tested to be able to substitute in an assembly. System testing in the assembly, they're all tested for the compatibility. These are needed to show compatibility with other components and will stand up to the elements. Some of these systems also have warranties attached with them, These warranties can range up to 25 years of labor and material. So just into review and to summarize, although the traditional method, if properly constructed, can perform adequately, there are new enhanced installation systems that deliver much higher performance levels and therefore higher value. These systems also offer additional assurances of the quality, like manufacturer's warranties, that are not available on traditional methods. So got that new codes are pushing that new systems that are more energy saving and provide long-term value for owners. Being sure that your systems are providing the best protection and possible for savings and life of the building. Making sure that your design performs as designed, being detailed in the instructions and the details. Again, the details, the devil's in the details here. And then using systems that are tested and work together. Very important there. And then I'm wrapping this one up. So to summarize, although the traditional methods, if properly constructed, can perform adequately, there are new enhanced installation systems that can deliver much higher performance levels and therefore higher value. These systems also offer additional assurance of quality, like manufacturer's warranty that I mentioned before, that are not available on those traditional methods. So I want to thank you all. Does anybody have any questions regarding this CEU presentation? Otherwise, I do have a couple other slides for you.
We do have one that just came up related to the envelope and different components. They contract in different way, mainly because of temperature variations. In addition to the regular vertical water penetration in Florida, the horizontal one is a big issue. Any mechanical and permanent solution to prevent the above penetration. Vince, I'm reading that question and I just want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly. So you're looking at what's the best way to waterproof the building envelope and then also compensate for differential movement among materials and whatnot. So Anita, when we look at that, we're talking about a whole bunch of different things in terms of combination. Down here, I see projects that have cast concrete elements. We see things with CMUs, we see metal stud infill. We do all those different things. Now, we focused on codes at this presentation, but if we look at something like the MVIS system, which is a masonry veneer installation system, that has a number of different pieces that are made for transition over those varying materials. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that are used in that application?
Yes, and I will get to that after when I can talk product.
Go ahead. We're fine to go ahead and do that. We can talk a little bit more because this is a specific question. We're going to talk a little bit here where we're going to talk about product, but at the same time, this is also to the subject in general in terms of how you handle the differential movement. So we're going to talk some proprietary names, but it still is an example of how you handle that differential movement with materials, with the transition tapes and different things like that. So go ahead. I'll let you go, Anita.
Yeah, with the different transitions, because I can't see the question to reiterate it. But with any of your systems, we have, our water or crack isolation membranes. Then you have I'm looking at this one here, your air barriers, your load bearing air and water barriers. So we're looking for the moisture. I apologize because I do not have that question in front of me.
Yeah.
So if you have more details, go for it, Chris, because
it's not a problem. So essentially, essentially what we're running into is with those differential materials, we want to be able to let them move. Another perfect example is when you have any kind of movement joint in a substrate for a CMU wall, you don't want to go over the top of it with stone. You want to mimic it throughout the veneer so that when that substrate moves, the stone is independent and moves with it. It doesn't go over the top of it and try and transpose any kind of transition of materials. So in terms of, I'll use the MVIS system as an example, which is a masonry veneer installation system. You actually have to establish a standardized plane there. So in establishing that plane, we're looking at going over the top of any transitioning materials with a transition tape, where you can still have a standard plane there that ensures water and air protection with their air and water barrier product. And it's taking care of the movement between the two of them because it has an elasticity that'll manage the relationship of the two materials. So essentially, there are precautions and good specification to go over that transition of materials and compensate for the movement of concrete versus the movement of a steel or wood stud. We don't see a lot of concrete and then an infill with a wood. We typically will see on commercial projects and either some of the higher end residential, you will see a CMU or a concrete element, and then it'll have a steel infill here. The steel infill, you over the top of that, you're going to put in a sheathing. On top of that sheathing, you want it designed to an L/650 to meet the warranty requirements. But what will happen is as those two elements move, that transition tape gives you a constant plane that'll move with them. So it has a modulus of elasticity that will move with it so that you have a consistent plane underneath. I think that's probably the best way to explain it.
Thank you, Chris.
So go ahead, I'll let you jump back into your slides. We don't have any other questions right now, so.
Okay, I just have a couple other slides. So now that we can talk a little bit, I just want to speak about some Latticrete systems. One showing here, again, how detailed those walls are using a complete Latticrete masonry veneer installation system. And this starting, going back behind, you got your wheat flashing, your exterior rated sheathing, your air barrier, class 3, a C3, your drainage plane, your rigid foam insulation, and then we have our masonry veneer installation, our water crack isolation membrane to allow for some movement. Then you have your masonry veneer mortar, and then your stones, and then a pointing mortar. So you can see how detailed, again, these wall assemblies can get. Anytime that you have any questions regarding this, please reach out. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for 7.5 years and never had one wall be exactly the same. I'm just going to touch on a couple products here in regards to those assemblies. We have our air and water barriers, different anti-fracture membranes, your adhesives, your mortar beds, your pointing mortar and sealant. And Latticrete offers a 15-year system warranty for over steel and wood frame exterior facades. Again, anytime that you're working on these, you need assistance in your specifications, your details, those on-site supports, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my contact information back up here for you. I am here to help. Chris is here to help get us involved in your projects to assure that you have successful installations with a warranty. You have that security as well for the ownership, knowing that you're not going to have any failures where stones are falling off of the buildings, having a high liability when a stone is falling off the 10th floor of a building. Here, using a Latticrete system, ensure that they have a warranty to be achieved with it. So I am going to be done with this. If anybody has any questions, my contact information is up on the screen. By all means, reach out to me, reach out to Chris, reach out to Paul. We all work cohesively together as they have the amazing stones, and then we have the installation materials. Your buildings are only look as good as and stones as the installation materials behind it. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. You want any lunch presentations, would love to come out and meet with you along with Chris and do lunch presentations for your firms as well. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, Anita, thank you for
Yeah,
your presentation. But yeah, I think Chris may have a couple comments, and I certainly have a couple comments. So don't hang up yet.
Yep, we've got we had some more questions specific to the movement in the wall. John had asked me to elaborate a little bit more. Can you go back to your slide that shows your product line? One forward, perfect. So essentially with their MVIS system, and what we're looking at is you have a type of rigid material that's your substrate or your structural element. Now that can be in Florida. I'll speak specifically to that because that's where I'm based out of. And Anita's our expert on a whole bunch of different states, but let me speak specifically to Florida on this. So we have typical substrates you'll see here are a precast concrete element. It could be tilt up. It could be a structural element that has infill with CMU or steel studs, any number of different things. We also have your typical CMU, which on commercial projects, if you're looking at I-4 corridor south, that's probably going to encompass about 90% of the commercial projects out there, 100% of schools and things like that in the whole state, where you have CMU primarily. And then we do have different elements that are with the steel studs. So essentially, what happens with their air and water barriers and whatnot, you want to establish a drainage plane and give that protection to any kind of moisture or anything with the air and water barrier product with the MVIS system. And what happens is when you have those different elements moving behind it, it's hard to establish that plane. So essentially what happens is the anti-fracture fabric, and then there's the anti-fracture compounds and the different elements that are there. You're handling that transition by going over the top of it. It's no different than when you take drywall and you're finishing drywall, you're going to go ahead and put, tape and mud up there. It's the exact same thing when you're going through the transitions. You want to establish that plane out there. The products that are anti-fracture have a modulus of elasticity that's going to cause them to be flexible and still maintain their integrity. They're not going to crack and do things like that. So that's made to give you that established plane. The established plane has an air and water barrier that goes over the top of it. Once the air and water barrier goes over the top of it, that gives you that protection. There's 2 coats of air and water barrier. When it's over a concrete element, whether it's a poured one or a CMU, it establishes a 25-year bond warranty. When it's going over a steel stud with a structural sheathing on the outside that has a rating of an L over 650 or higher, that'll give you a 15-year bond warranty. And what ends up happening is you use the MVIS product, either the thin brick, the veneer mortar, the lightweight mortar, or the high bond, depending on your product. You plug that into it, and that'll bond your material to it, and the two react together and give you a very stable wall system. So with that, you're taking in consideration the movement of the product and giving you a stable exterior facade. The other thing, when there's a designed-in movement joint, a control joint, expansion joints, different things like that you run into, you have to let that come all the way through the veneer. So you have to honor that and mimic it through the whole veneer, because that's a dramatic place where it's moved and you really can't control it because it's an element of CMU construction or poured concrete. So what happens is you have to establish that same plane on your exterior veneer so that it works. So that sort of outlines it. I hope that answers the question in terms of trying to establish what works the best. Anything you want to add to that, Anita? I was running through a whole bunch of stuff there, but
Nope, you're good because you pointed out all of the different adhesives. And again, based on the project, get us involved and we can point you into the direct products that need to be used for that given project based on the location and what kind of wall assembly that we're trying to achieve here.
That's a great point, Anita, because what happens is that's going to give you, everyone talks about value engineering and all the different issues. And a lot of times when you specify something and you don't have a real tight spec that's really pinpointed at the application and the best use, it's susceptible to value engineering. We can help you do value engineering on the front end to establish your waterproofing, establish a very stable exterior veneer with the adhesion. And if you look at the adhesives that are on the screen, we're plugging in the right system with the right tolerances and strength performance. You don't need to use a high bond veneer system for a lightweight exterior like a thin brick, for example. You can go to the thin brick mortar and you're not killing an ant with a hand grenade. You're using the right product for the right application. And it's just common sense. If you're going to hold on a small thin brick versus holding on a natural stone or any kind of large scale unit or anything that's close to that 15-pound limit per square foot, you don't need that for the thin brick. So it's a value engineering on the front end that you're taking care of to still get what you want out there. Now, there's another question here about contractor certification for the system. At the distribution, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris. I'll just add
I was just going to say, at the distribution level in Florida, we give training so that people understand how to do it. Our rep in this market is Joe Still. Joe's gone out and done a number of different trainings and presentations, a lot of the same things that Anita does. And we don't have an explicit certification program, but we make sure they're well-rounded in how to use the product, how to install it, and they're ready to go on it. I mean, anything you want to add to that?
And what we can do as well, like Chris had alluded to, is we make sure that these contractors are comfortable and understand, and we train them on using these systems. And then we'll also provide that on-site support as well. So when they're starting, they're doing a mock-up or participate in those pre-construction meetings, very important as well. We like to get involved with those, participate in those pre-construction. You're doing the mock-up walls. Let's check and be on site for those. And then when you do start the project, we can be on site just to make sure that there's no questions, or if there's questions that need to be answered out on site, we are there to help you.
Another question just came up in terms of Miami-Dade and high velocity wind testing and whatnot. You do have projectile testing in place, correct, Anita?
Correct. We do have a system that does meet Miami-Dade code, and that was an excruciating testing.
Yeah, I've been through that. It's a character builder, to say the least, to try and go through and actually process that. It can be on the difficult side. It's never ending. It's a big investment, but it really is something that is very advantageous to the product line. It gives you all peace of mind when you're specifying the product and applying it out there. One other thing back to installers on this, we've had a lot of success turning installers and making them friendly to this because they see the opportunity for it. If you look at it when you go to your owner, it does a lot of things. It gives your owner peace of mind in terms of the warranty and the performance values of it. When you're talking to your general contractor, a lot of times they're going to want to default to the old methods and just use a Type S or a Type S, polymer fortified and all those different things. That's great, but this is really all encompassing. So when we have a project that you're working on, we can go through the installation of this and the benefits and the warranty aspects of it with you and the owner and the design team, and sort of do that value engineering on the front end, things of that nature. Now, there's another question here as far as the post-installation inspections required for warranty enforcement. No, they don't do that. If there is a failure, it's very easy to see what exactly happened. One of the things that we do when we work through the specification is we want to help you as an architect or the GC sort of be able to police things as they're going up. It's hard for us to be everywhere, every place when we're doing so many of these projects, but we talk about the minimum thicknesses and the 2 coats of air and water barrier. We talk about the different troubleshooting, the complete application on the back of the product when it's installed in the wall, all those different aspects. So we try and empower both you and the GC to be your best troubleshooter on it. And then really the installers see great value in being able to offer this as an all-encompassing system. The other thing that's nice is if there's any kind of leaks in the wall, we've all been on jobs where the thin veneer installer says, well, that was a horrible waterproofing job when I started, and you can't blame me. And then the waterproofer is going to say, that installer tore my system up. So all they end up doing is pointing at each other, and that never goes well. This is bringing it under a single source, which has a lot of value to it in terms of accountability for the performance of the wall. So hopefully that answered your questions in that regard. I know, John, you've had a few of them regarding that. Any other questions that people may have about the product? One last thing on the warranty that I just realized, you have to have the air and water barrier, and you have to have their adhesive or adhering material used. If you don't require pointing mortar on it, or pointing mortar, it does not have the right shade or something you're looking to, we can request through Adhered that they waive that part of it, and they'll give you a certificate in most cases saying, yeah, well, it's a dry stack product, tuck pointing mortar is not to be used, or we're fine with honoring the warranty for bond because of a different tuck pointing mortar is to be used. But that's something you need to establish at the specification level. The other thing to look at, the current TCNA guidelines, which are in ICC and the TMS 402-602, specifically talk about the limitations of thin veneer, which is, number one, it has to be under 15 pounds per square foot. No one length can be larger than 30 inches. And the square foot of the material cannot be any per piece, cannot be anything larger than 5 feet. Now, those are all things that do go along with this warranty. And also the material can't be over 2 5/8 inch thickness, because you're going to have that tilting or pulling action, because it'll create a lateral force instead of it just sliding down the wall. It'll want to tilt away from the wall. Now, those standards, I know Joe Still, I think, is probably signed on, and he's cringing right now because those standards are about to change. He's told me that.
Yes.
They are about to
Yes.
change. Anita, do you know where they're going to, or have you got that information?
I know that they are in the works of change, but I don't think they've officially gone into into code yet.
I think the next publication will have it out there. But we've had situations where we've been able to have testing done and talk about the exterior veneer, the substrate, and which is the best mortar to use underneath it. And Latacrete has given us warranty specific to products that are a variation of that right now, or vary from those specifications, I should say, or an exception to those specifications as far as weight and performance requirements. So we've run into that too. So if you have an issue specific to thin veneer, we can work those through as needed and run with it. It's not a problem. I've put my information up in chat. I'll post it in chat here really quick. My email, you've got everything with Anita right here. This is a very simple product category in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of opportunities to do some good things for your job with this too, in terms of the value engineering on the front end, really giving a resilient product, resilient performance. So you just gotta, take a look at it. If you have any questions, you can reach out directly to me. You've got Anita's information on here, and I don't see any new questions. So I think we're in the clear, Anita.